There is a baseball game happening in a small town. Suddenly, an old man carrying a hunting rifle storms onto the field. The initially joyful atmosphere suddenly becomes tense. The players on the field are frightened and run away. Mark, the sheriff, realizes the situation is not good, so he quickly runs onto the field and tells the old man to put the gun down. He initially thought the man was just drunk and acting crazy, but unexpectedly, the next second, the old man points the gun at him. When Mark was about to draw his gun for self-defense, the old man intended to pull the trigger. This scene made everyone present terrified. Mark didn't expect that he would actually pull the trigger. Everyone knew that the old man was known as a good person in this town. However, no one knew that this small town was about to face a major disaster. After the forensic examination of the body, the doctor saw that the old man was not drunk, nor had he used any illegal drugs. His wife also said that he quit drinking 2 years ago. How could he drink again? Faced with his wife's slap, Mark could only endure in silence. But he had no other choice. If your speed wasn't fast, then the person in that coffin could have been you. However, as one wave subsides, another arises. That night, something terrifying happened in the small town. A man locked his wife and children in the house, then poured gasoline all around the outside, lit a match and burned the house down. By the time Mark arrived, the fire was out of control, but the man just whistled indifferently. Stranger still, the man's appearance was very similar to the old man who had been killed. His eyes were empty as if controlled by something. At the same time, some villagers were out hunting in the forest. Suddenly, they saw a parachute hanging from a tree. They picked up the rope to take a look, and found the body of a pilot. Mark received the report and immediately went to the scene. Based on the level of decomposition of the body, it can be confirmed that the body has been decomposing for over a week. The strange thing is, no airplane wreckage was found in the surrounding areas. Could it have fallen into the river? Mark led his 2 associates along the river in search, and indeed found the plane wreckage sunk to the riverbed not far away. The situation was getting stranger and stranger. Something major happened, yet the press and news didn't report it at all. Although it was unclear if there were any secrets hidden in the plane at the bottom of the lake, Mark believed that the recent incidents were definitely connected to the crashed plane, because the town's water supply came from that river, so they guessed that the water source had a problem. Sure enough, after investigating the water supply system, they discovered the old man who died at the beginning was the family living closest to the water source. Mark felt uneasy, so he immediately drove to the mayor's house, told him to shut off the town's water supply immediately, or else something big would happen. However, the mayor did not agree, because the town mainly relies on agriculture. Right now is also the best time for planting. They can't cut off the water supply because of Mark's speculation. When the crops are damaged, who will take responsibility? The water supply will continue. For the safety of the people, Mark can only personally go and shut off the water supply. But by the time they returned to the police station, they discovered the man in the cell was lying on the ground. Not only was blood coming from his mouth, but the veins on his face were also visible. Just as both of them didn't know what to do, the man suddenly turned into a zombie. Oh my god, it seems like we have to move him as soon as possible. Mark originally wanted to call his superior for help, but not only was the phone call unsuccessful, even the computer lost connection. He took the phone and went outside, only to find that the phone had no signal. Even more strangely, the once bustling and lively town suddenly turned into a deserted place. Worried something happened to the forensic doctor, Mark sprinted to the morgue. However, not only did he not see the forensic doctor, but he also found a man with his eyes and mouth sewn shut, wriggling on the bed. Seeing this scene, Mark turned pale with fear. Just as he was about to untie the man, he was knocked unconscious by the forensic doctor from behind. Although the move was too fast, leaving Mark stunned for a moment, the forensic doctor didn't stop there. He even took an electric saw, intending to kill Mark. Luckily, Mark reacted in time, using his hands to try to block the saw. Then he violently threw it away. After getting free, he flipped over and pulled the doctor's coat backward. Just like that, the forensic doctor was killed by his own saw. Unexpectedly, just as he breathed a sigh of relief, the chainsaw in the forensic doctor's hand seemed to have a soul. It directly moved towards Mark's leg. At the crucial moment, Ben arrived just in time, unplugged the power, saving Mark. That was close. Mark keenly sensed that surely more terrifying things were about to happen, but as the town sheriff, he could only call his wife to quickly pack and go back to her parents' house first. Unexpectedly, she couldn't bear to agree and leave her husband. However, While they were arguing about this, Legion, the wife, seemed to hear something. Mark went to the warehouse to check, but didn't find anything unusual. Suddenly, Legion's cries for help were heard. Mark wanted to run and save her, but unexpectedly, as soon as he ran out of the warehouse, he was caught by a group of armed soldiers. After that, he and his wife were both put on a bus. There were not just the two of them on the bus, but the entire town's residents had been taken there. Everyone was brought to a place for quarantine. They had to go to this extent. It looks like something big has happened, but the people have no idea what's going on. When facing Mark's question, the soldiers didn't say a word. Based on the people's temperature, they will be quarantined in group. Legion, due to his high body temperature, was separated from Mark. Although she explained that it might be because of her pregnancy, the soldiers still didn't listen. Legion was eventually taken to an isolation room, where all the patients were those who had developed a fever after using the water source. Some had even started to transform. At that moment, the alarm sound suddenly rang out. It turned out that those infected were outside confronting the soldiers, causing the scene to fall into chaos. The quarantined person took the opportunity to break through the barrier. Inside, many infected people are still trapped. The army saw the situation getting out of control. They could only use helicopters for evacuation. At the same time, Mark and Ben took advantage of the chaos to run to the police station. The two grabbed their guns, preparing to return to the quarantine zone to rescue Legion. At this moment, Legion was still tied to the hospital bed. She suddenly discovered that her colleague was also tied up next to her, but as the two were comforting each other, a noise suddenly came from outside. An infected person appeared, holding a four-pronged rake. The two saw this scene and dared not make a sound. And the ones tied to the beds were like lambs to the slaughter. All perished under his deadly scythe. Seeing that the next victim is her colleague, Jenna, Legion shouted for help to save her colleague, but also attracted the attention of the infected person. He slowly dragged the rake towards Legion. Just as she was about to be stabbed, Mark timely shot the assailant. The two were successfully rescued. They left the quarantine room. They prepared to find a car to leave this town, but the road had turned into a devastated battlefield. Basically, no cars were operational anymore. They had no choice but to walk. Then they went to a nearby farm to look for a working car. Seeing strangers intruding, the farm owner immediately pointed a gun at them. After confirming they were all normal people, at this moment, John lowered his gun. Suddenly Mark heard something. They quickly ran into the warehouse. They saw some soldiers preparing to take John's family away. Seeing this scene, John anxiously ran out wanting to save his relatives, but he was shot dead by soldiers who thought he was infected. Then his family was also killed on the spot. Obviously, to control the epidemic, soldiers have started to handle people indiscriminately. Now they not only have to face the infected, but also be wary of being discovered by the military. However, when they were about to leave the warehouse, they found a soldier heading this way. Mark quickly hid behind the door. The moment he stepped into the warehouse, he was ambushed. Under the coordination of the two people, the soldier was captured alive, just like that. But after some interrogation, he still didn't know what had happened. He only knew that the town had been infected by an unidentified virus. Their superiors sent them to lock down the town and handle the infected people. After he finished speaking, the soldier begged Mark to release him and promised not to reveal them. Seeing another soldier approaching outside, Mark had no choice but to trust him, and he kept his promise. He went out to distract the approaching soldier. After dawn, they continued on their way. They went to Mark's house, preparing some useful items to bring along, then drove out of this town. However, when Legion looked back at the gifts she had prepared for the baby, unaware that an infected person was standing behind her, Mark saw his wife hadn't come down yet, so he ran upstairs to check. But as soon as he pushed the door open, seeing Legion tied up again, Mark didn't even have time to react. When an infected person came from behind and grabbed his neck, he wanted to pick up the gun. Unexpectedly, he got stabbed in the back of his hand. The attacker was Mrs. Megan, the wife of the old man Mark shot at the beginning of the movie. Even after their transformation, they still thought about avenging the old man. Seeing the opponent point a gun at his wife's head, Mark flew into a rage. He broke free from restraint, knocked the son down, and grabbed Megan's neck. But as she fell, the son pointed the gun at Mark's head. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. It turned out Ben had shot him from outside the window. They wanted to drive out of town, but unexpectedly saw a military helicopter. Seeing this, Mark hurriedly drove into a car wash. Luckily, the helicopter didn't chase them. Just when they sighed in relief, they fell into a car wash trap set by the infected. By the time Mark wanted to drive away, it was too late. Start the car. Quickly drive away from here. As the car slowly moved into the car wash, the infected had been hiding in there beforehand. Immediately, they were attacked from all directions. After a desperate struggle, the car finally managed to break out. However, the danger did not stop there. An infected person suddenly appeared on the car roof, using a rope to strangle Jane. Seeing Jane being dragged out of the car, they immediately got out of the car to save her. Although she was brought down in time, they still couldn't save Jane. The three were grieving. Then a military missile was fired at them. Fortunately, they had gotten out of the car. Otherwise, the consequences would have been disastrous. Although they escaped a calamity, their car was destroyed. The three had to continue on foot. Then they found a car on the road. Unfortunately, it was damaged inside. At this moment, a police car suddenly approached them. Mark intended to use his gun to threaten the driver to stop, but Ben used a barricade to block the road. The car lost control and flipped several times. Luckily, the police officer inside is still okay. Mark went over to question him. What exactly happened in the town? The police officer didn't evade. He told them the whole truth. Turns out the crashed plane was carrying a biochemical substance. Initially, it was sent to a military zone. I didn't expect to get stabbed and end up in this small town. This virus causes people to lose their sanity, and it spreads through the water supply. Once infected, you will transform within 2 days. If nothing happens afterward, it means you haven't been infected. Mark originally wanted to keep questioning him. I didn't expect him to be shot dead by Ben. Ben's unusual behavior drove Mark crazy. It's highly likely that Ben is infected. To prevent him from causing more trouble, Mark had no choice but to confiscate Ben's gun. After that, they continued to leave town, but when they reached the highway, they found that it was blocked. To buy time for the two to escape, Ben, who was about to turn, decided to go ahead. He told Mark that he was going to die anyway, so he might as well go out and draw fire so the two of them could escape. Mark saw Ben's determination, so he handed him the pistol in his hand. After saying goodbye to them, Ben resolutely walked toward the barricade. The result is certainly being shot down by the military, but he also successfully attracted the soldiers' attention, creating an opportunity for Mark and his wife to escape. They ran along the highway, then reached a service station. Unexpectedly, this place had also fallen. Seeing shell casings scattered all over the ground and dead bodies in the trucks, only then did the two realize. So the so-called quarantine is to treat people in an inhumane way. Right now they need to figure out a way to leave this place. While Mark was looking for some useful items, he found the radio left by the soldiers. A message came through it. Attention everyone, the countdown will start in 8 minutes. Although he didn't know what this meant, but it's definitely not something good. The two quickly found a truck, getting ready to drive away from this place. When Mark was looking for the keys on the corpse, an infected person with a gun suddenly appeared in front of him. Mark just turned around to get in the car, and another infected person grabbed his ankle. He used force to pull Mark down. Legion wanted to get out of the car to save him. Unexpectedly, an infected person pointed a gun at her. Mark was wrestling with the attacker under the car. The infected person with the gun was also slowly approaching Legion. The moment he opened the car door, Legion, hiding inside, shot at him. Mark was at a disadvantage at this time. Seeing the attacker charge towards him again, Mark quickly stood up, pushed the iron box containing oil aside. Then he lit the lighter and threw it on the ground. When the oil caught fire, the fierce flames immediately burned the infected person. The two quickly drove the truck away from the place. Thinking about the news they just heard, Mark didn't dare to delay. At this moment, a countdown timer in the car transmitted the time. Less than half a minute left. They didn't know what would happen when the countdown ended, just knew they had to leave the town as quickly as possible. Oh my god, I didn't expect the military to want to wipe out everything, so they planted bombs all over the town. The truck was immediately overturned by the wave from the explosion sweeping through, but fortunately, both of them miraculously survived. When they looked towards the town once more, all they could see was a huge mushroom cloud. At the end of the movie, the two walked to another town, except their actions have all been observed by military satellites. The next target is City P, which has a population of 25,000. Initiate lockdown targeting.